Ever get that feeling in sales calls? Like it's like a rehearsed dance, polite, predictable, but also kind of forgettable. What if we could ditch the script, have those real conversations, the ones that uncover hidden needs and build those relationships that last? Well, that's what we're diving into. Radically authentic discovery, or RAD, as the sources call it. We've got articles, research, the whole shebang, all saying that RAD is changing the game for sales and customer success, even for big companies.
The cool thing is how RAD challenges that old idea of sales being all about, persuasion. It's saying real influence comes from actually being curious.
Okay, I like where this is going, but let's lose the jargon for a sec. The sources mention these disruptive questions. What does that even mean in real-world terms? Sounds kind of harsh, no?
It's not about being disruptive just to shake things up. It's more about, snapping people out of those autopilot responses. Think about it. How often do we fall back on those pre-programmed answers? Even in our regular lives, RAD questions cut through all that and make people really think.
So instead of, what are your pain points? Which, let's be honest, everyone's tired of hearing, you might ask.
Yeah.
What? Give us an example. Help us out here.
Picture this. If I was a fly on the wall at your next big meeting, what's the one thing I'd hear you really going back and forth on? Boom. You're not just a vendor anymore. You're right there in the action.
That's pretty clever, I have to admit. It changes things up, and I'd bet gets you much better answers than those generic questions ever could. But hold on, is this just for those first sales calls? Or can you use this RAD approach throughout, the whole customer journey? The sources seem to think it works everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Think about those dreaded quarterly business review things. Instead of just running through the numbers, you could ask, how has the way you see our solutions value? How has that changed since we last chatted?
It gets them thinking, digging deeper, giving more useful feedback.
Right. Instead of just, are you happy or not? It's, tell me the story of how your thoughts have evolved. Way more nuanced, way more valuable.
Exactly. And that kind of insight, that's gold. It lets you adjust your approach, get ahead of problems, and build relationships that are, more genuine. So building trust, going deeper. But the sources also talk about using AI tools like TranscribeIQ to supercharge this whole RAD process. At first, that felt kind of weird to me. How can AI, something artificial, make these very human interactions more authentic? It seems backwards.
Great question, and it highlights a common misunderstanding about AI. It's not about replacing human connection, but actually making it stronger. Imagine a tool that analyzes your calls, not to spit out perfect responses, but to catch those subtle emotional cues we might miss.
So instead of frantically taking notes, you can actually be present, knowing the AI is grabbing those details. It frees you to listen better and respond more authentically right there in the moment.
Exactly, like having a co-pilot pointing out those crucial things, those missed connections, so you can go back and tweak your approach. It's all about boosting your empathy, not replacing it.
Okay, now it's clicking. I see how AI could be a huge help with those RAD principles. But let's be real for a sec. Even with the best questions and fancy AI, sales sometimes feels, icky, right? Like you're always going for the close, even when it's not the right fit. The sources seem to think RAD flips that whole script.
It does, and this is where that authenticity part is huge, EE. The sources stress that RAD isn't about putting on an act or tricking people. It's about tapping into your own genuine curiosity and letting that lead your conversations.
So every interaction isn't about making the sale. It's a chance to learn, to understand their world, their struggles, what they're aiming for, even if it doesn't immediately help you close a deal.
Exactly. And that mindset shift is what makes RAD so powerful. When you're truly curious, people feel it. They open up more, share their real needs, and you don't just get customers, you get raving fans.
This is really making me rethink things. It's like we're rewiring the whole DNA of sales and customer success from the inside out. We've got these RAD questions, embracing that genuine curiosity, even using AI. But what about actually putting this into practice? Where do we even start with this RAD approach?
Excellent question, and it's one we'll dig into as we keep going with our deep dive. In part 2, we're going to explore some practical tips and tricks for bringing RAD to life in your everyday work.
And we're back for more of the deep dive. All right, so we've got the basics of RAD down, right? Ditch the scripts, get really curious, use those disruptive questions to spark some real conversations. But now for the nitty-gritty. How do we actually DO this RAD thing in our daily grind?
Well, The sources have some pretty handy advice, and it all starts with like a mindset shift. It's about seeing each interaction not just as, a transaction, but as a chance to learn something new. Like you're a treasure hunter looking for those golden nuggets.
Okay, I like that. But instead of gold, we're digging for those hidden needs, those things our customers might not even realize they want.
Exactly. And every good treasure hunter needs the right tools. One thing the sources talk about is building a RAD question bank.
Question bank, huh? That sounds interesting. How do we even start making one?
It's actually not as complicated as it sounds. Just brainstorm a bunch of questions that go deeper than the usual stuff. Remember that fly on the wall question we talked about? That's a perfect example. Instead of a plain, what are your goals? Try something like, let's say we meet again in a year, and you're totally stoked about your progress. What are you celebrating?
Whoa, that's a good one. It really gets them thinking about what they really want. I'm writing that down. But coming up with these RAD questions on the spot, it feels kind of daunting, The sources say it's okay to start small, right? We don't have to change everything overnight.
Definitely not. Even adding one or two RAD questions to your next conversation can make a difference. Focus on quality over quantity. It's about making those small changes that really make people think.
Yeah, because nobody wants to feel like they're being grilled by some kind of sales robot, right?
Hmm.
Authenticity is key here, wouldn't you say? The sources are big on the idea that it's not just the words we use, it's the feeling behind them, the why.
Absolutely. It always comes back to that genuine curiosity. When you're truly interested in someone's perspective, they can tell. It shows in the way you talk, your body language, everything.
It's like you can always spot a fake smile a mile away. Being real, being genuine, that's what draws people in. And speaking of being genuine, the sources talk about the importance of actually listening to the answers we get. In a world where everyone's always rushing to have the answer, sometimes we forget how powerful it is to just be present and listen to understand.
Such a good point. RAD isn't just about asking, it's about really hearing the answers. It's about active listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Right. Put those phones away, shut off the notifications, and really pay attention to what the other person is saying, and not just the words themselves, but how they're saying it.
Yes. Those little cues, the pauses, the tone of voice, they tell you so much more than words ever could.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. The sources say AI can actually make us better listeners. Now, before you think we've gone off the deep end here, hear me out. Tools like TranscribeIQ, they can analyze conversations on the fly. They pick up not just what's said, but the emotions underneath, even suggesting follow-up questions based on those feelings.
It's like having this super-powered listening buddy right there with you, catching all those details our human brains miss, especially when we're already juggling a million things. I'm starting to see how this tech could be a game changer for building empathy and really being present in conversations.
Right. It's not about handing over our empathy to AI, but using it to understand emotions better and connect on a deeper level.
Exactly. And that brings us to another piece of the puzzle. The sources emphasize storytelling. They say it's a vital part of RAD. Why is that, you think?
Well, stories are how we connect, how we build empathy. They let us tap into those shared experiences, relate on a human level, and make information stick.
Exactly. Instead of just listing off features and benefits, you're inviting your customers into a story, making them feel something real. It's way more effective than any sales pitch. But how do we actually use storytelling in this RAD toolkit? Any tips?
I was just about to ask that.
One powerful technique is to use stories as examples to explain things better. Like instead of saying, our solution boosts efficiency, you tell a story about a customer who is struggling and how your solution helped them overcome those challenges and reach their goals.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like saying, don't just take my word for it. Listen to this real-life success story. That's way more convincing. But what about getting our customers to share their stories? It can be tough to open up, especially in a business setting.
For sure, which is why creating that safe, trusting environment is so important. You can start by asking open-ended questions that invite them to share. Instead of, what are your pain points? Try something like, tell me about a time you faced a big challenge in this area. What happened? How did you deal with it?
I love that. It shows you genuinely care about their experiences, that their perspective matters. It's not about expert versus newbie anymore. It's about exploring together. This is such insightful stuff. It feels like we're just scratching the surface of what RAD can do.
We are, and in our last segment, we'll explore how to measure if this whole RAD thing is actually working and share some inspiring stories of companies who are seeing amazing results by embracing this approach. Stay tuned.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. It's been pretty eye-opening exploring radically authentic discovery, right? But I gotta ask, with all these disruptive questions and digging deep, does it actually, move the needle? Does RAD really work?
That's the question, isn't it? The
Yeah.
bottom line. And from the looks of the research we've gone through, it's not just some fluffy feel-good stuff. RAD is being linked to some serious results.
All right, lay it on me. What kind of impact are we talking here?
Think bigger sales, larger deal sizes, and this is the big one, those long-term customer relationships that everyone's after, the kind that turns into repeat business. It's about going beyond those one-off deals and building something that lasts.
Now that's what I'm talking about. But how do you even measure something like authenticity?
Yeah.
How do you put numbers on that human connection?
One of the key things the sources point to is something called customer lifetime value, CLV. It's basically a way to measure the total revenue you can expect from a single customer over the entire time they're with you. Turns out companies using this RAD approach are seeing a big jump in their CLV.
Makes sense if you think about it. When you build those strong, trusting relationships, customers are less likely to jump ship when a competitor dangles a lower price.
Exactly. It's about loyalty that goes way beyond just price. The sources even talk about how RAD is connected to more referrals. When customers feel truly valued, they can't help but tell others about it.
It's like they become walking, talking advertisements for your business. You can't buy that kind of word of mouth.
But let's shift gears a bit. What about customer feedback? It can be tough to get honest, constructive feedback, even when you're genuinely open to it.
Oh, for sure. And that's where the trust you build with RAD is so crucial. When you've shown your customers you actually care about their experience, they're way more comfortable sharing what's really on their mind, good or bad.
They know you're not just looking for a pat on the back. You actually want to know how to improve. Exactly. And that feedback, even the critical stuff, is pure gold. It helps you find those blind spots, fix problems before they blow up, and just keep getting better at serving your customers.
So you're turning those potentially awkward conversations into opportunities to grow and innovate. We've talked about sales, customer loyalty, feedback, but what about the bigger picture? Company culture. The sources seem to think RAD can start some positive change on a much larger scale.
That's an interesting angle. See, RAD isn't just about changing how you talk to customers. It's about creating a whole different work environment, one that's more customer-focused, more collaborative, just a more fulfilling place to be.
So it's about changing the DNA of the company itself, shifting from just chasing transactions to building real connections and celebrating each other's wins. That's a powerful idea.
It really is. And it starts from the top, with leaders embracing these principles and giving their teams the power to do the same. When RAD becomes part of the company's culture, it spreads everywhere, creating a more engaged, motivated, and customer-obsessed team.
It's like this awesome cycle where happy, empowered employees create happy, loyal customers, which fuels more growth and success for everyone.
Precisely. That's the beauty of this whole RAD approach. It's a win-win-win. It's not just good for business, it's good for the people and the relationships that make businesses successful in the first place.
It's been quite a journey diving into RAD and all its potential. So as we wrap things up, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with today?
That RAD isn't just another strategy or a set of techniques to memorize. It's a different way of thinking, a different way of showing up. It's about treating every interaction with a customer or even your coworkers as a chance to really connect, learn something new, and build something great together.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So, to all our listeners out there, tap into your curiosity, toss out those tired old scripts, and embrace the power of being radically authentic. You never know what amazing things you might discover. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.